So being a moderately popular YouTubeist, I get a lot of comments on my videos. Most of them trying to call me out on stuff I never actually said in the video to the request to do X, Y and Z. But there was one comment left on the 1950 British Grand Prix video that I actually had to sit down and think about. Now normally I don't really do these kinds of things because they just take far too long to make and I can never really come up with a proper answer to them. But on this occasion I did sit down and actually think it through, because it means I get to use my opinions to put something together here. And it goes thusly. I was challenged by the YouTube user Paul McMullen to put together my dream F1 season. The sort of thing I would probably put together for AI racing in Grand Prix 4. And actually that might be something I could try to do if I can get it working, because I won't actually have to do any driving and I can just set the AI to do it and commentate over what's going on. But anyway, Paul challenged me to create this dream season using drivers, circuits and teams from 1994, which is when I started watching Formula 1. So the rules. For drivers, these drivers must have completed 10 Grand Prix since the start of the 1994 season. All drivers are at their peak in terms of season performance, so it would be, for example, 1997 David Coulthard, and so on. And I can have a maximum of 26 drivers. For teams, I'm not allowed renamed or descendant teams on the grid at the same time, so no Jaguar and Red Bull at the same time, no Aston Martin and Jordan at the same time, no Tyrrell and Honda, no Tyrrell and Brawn, no Brawn and Mercedes. I think you get the idea. And for the circuits, it's a minimum of 16 and a maximum of 23. But the layouts can be any layout that have been used since 1994, so, I could, in theory, have the Spa layout with the Eau Rouge chicane. Extra rules include any qualifying format, any points format, and there were rules regarding tyres and stuff, so I'm just going to pick an overall regulation. So for example, a 1996 era car with grooves and a V6 hybrid, because I can, but that's not what I've picked. This bit was originally a lot more spread out, but I thought I'd condense it to save you being here for 900 years as I explain everything. So while we're still on the subject of cars, I thought I'd come straight off the bat with it and go for something in the region of the 2007 and 2008 era of cars. Because for me, these things represent engineered insanity that is Formula 1. The aero appendages coming off every part of the bodywork, the smaller overall build of these things that look way less sluggish on TV compared to the big heavy chonk boys of today, and yes, that noise. But I'd take this one stage further, rip out the 2.4 litre V8 and pop in that 3 litre V10. But it would be a V10 from about 2000, 2001 or so it revs that little bit lower and is a little bit more pleasing on the ear. At least, for me, anyway. I'd also put the car on the same sort of tyres that degrade like they do now, but are shaped to fit this sort of car, obviously. Because they're now on slicks, we can ditch the traction control, and because the tyres will degrade faster than how they did in these good old days, it should mean that drivers will have to take the wear into account, and it will affect things more than just the weight of the fuel on board. Because this was a common thing back in those days. Guy with less fuel is faster. Now he'll be faster, but if he burns the tyres out too soon, I think you can see how this works. And I would have moved the 3D models around a bit to sort of simulate what these tyres would look like, but it's far beyond what I'm capable of, so you'll just have to use your imagination here. So with the car and the regulations covered, let's see which teams I've picked to make the grid and who is actually going to be driving for these teams. And I've tried to make this grid as stacked and loaded as possible, because why not? Now this is going to be something to take with a pinch of salt, because obviously the 2004 Schumacher and Ferrari combo was way more dominant than the 2013 Vettel and Red Bull combo. So if I was to do this in Grand Prix 4, it would have to be equal performance cars but with a FIFA style driver rating system for them. It's so difficult to apportion performance and driver because of the different eras and years. So on the graphics coming up, if you see something like Jordan 1999, that's not the performance level of the Jordan from 1999, it's just the fact that I think that 1999 was the sexiest Jordan livery, so that's what the car would be painted like, because, like I say, you can't really match everything up because it's all subjective. Also, I can't really give every conceivable reason for my picks here because we'll be here all day, but I will give some more elaboration on stuff as and when. And just to make things that little bit more interesting, only drivers who drove for that team will be considered. So Schumacher can't drive for McLaren, but David Coulthard, for instance, can drive for Williams, McLaren or Red Bull. So then, let's kick things off with Ferrari, and Schumacher is obviously the number one pick. Prime Schumacher, 2004, I'd be stupid not to really, and partnering him is 2005 Raikkonen. Both Ferrari champions, and 2005 Raikkonen was just a beast in that McLaren. Next up is McLaren, and probably the easiest combo I came up with. 1998 Mika Hakkinen here with 2020 spec Lewis Hamilton. So far, pretty easy picks. Now, Williams was a little bit more tricky because there's a decent amount of drivers that have come and gone from the team since 1994, but like I mentioned before, I want this grid to be stacked, but also throw in a few wildcards. So here, I've got 2003 Juan Pablo Montoya and 1996 Jacques Villeneuve, a driver who won the world title, along with someone who should have won the world title. Now, because Renault has changed names through the years, I'm allowed to include drivers who drove for Toleman, Benetton, Alpine and Lotus, so long as they did the 10 races since 1994. So this driver pairing is 2006 Fernando Alonso, two-time world champion, driving alongside 2011 Jenson Button. Now, I'm sure there's going to be a few of you screaming at your TV screens or lobbing your device halfway across the room and then threatening to unsubscribe because I haven't picked Senna for either McLaren, Renault or Williams. Remember the rule: 10 races since the start of the 1994 season. Senna only did 3. This is an unfortunate technicality in the rules. Blame my parents for not making me sooner. Next up, we've got Red Bull. This was an easy pick as well. 2011 Vettel and 2022 Max Verstappen. Would be an interesting prospect. It would probably result in a massive internal squabble in reality, but still, that's a powerhouse of a team. Now we've got Jordan, the dark horse of the 1999 season, and in that team, well, I had to pick 1996 champion Damon Hill, and since Jordan includes the Midland, Force India, Racing Point, Aston Martin line, I've gone for Sergio Perez to partner him, to give a spread of the old days and the new more than anything. Also, I'll leave it to you to decide on what Prime Perez is, and this is probably where the middle of the grid starts to take shape, as the next team on the grid is Ligier. 1997 Olivier Panis could have been something if not for that crash at Montreal that broke his legs. He probably could have finished third in the championship standings after Schumacher's disqualification, and I've partnered him with Nick Heidfeld from 2008, from when he was driving those BMW Saubers. And speaking of Sauber, one of the long-standing teams in Formula 1 and one that's still hanging around and will be bought out by Audi very, very soon, I've got driving for the Swiss team 2015 Valtteri Bottas alongside 2008 Robert Kubica. This is probably the head-scratcher of all the teams. Arrows will probably be one of the backmarker teams here, and while the cars were often quite nice looking, some of the drivers who drove them were already locked in at other teams. So here, I've had to go with 1999 Mika Salo, and his teammate will be 1997 Gerhard Berger. Now, Berger drove for Arrows in the 80s, but he qualifies because he did those races after the start of the 1994 season, so he's eligible. I mean, it's Gerhard Berger as well. What a legend. 18 cars down, 4 to go. Minardi was a team that somehow stuck around despite being woefully underfunded. But what turns things around for Minardi here is that they often had drivers who went on to do bigger things, and they also became Toro Rosso and AlphaTauri, so you've got a decent pool of drivers to pick from. So for this team, I've got 2010 Mark Webber and 2022 Carlos Sainz. The final drivers on the 22 car grid come from Honda, which includes the Tyrrell, BAR, Braun and Mercedes lineage. So here I've gone for the easy pick, the 2016 version of the Monaco-based YouTuber Nico Rosberg, and joining him is 2004 Rubens Barrichello. Good, we've got the teams out of the way, finally. As for the circuits, I'm just going to put them all on your screen in one big chunk so you can just read them in one go, because there's nothing really special about it. It's mostly a late 90s calendar with a few additions and subtractions. The season starts in Melbourne, Australia, before moving to Bahrain and then arriving back in Europe for the San Marino Grand Prix at Imola. Then the teams are off to the Nürburgring and Barcelona's no Sector 3 chicane layout that leads to Monaco at the end of May. From there, it's Canada, Austria, Silverstone's 2008 layout, the German Grand Prix at Hockenheim, the Hungaroring, Spa with the old bus stop, Monza with the double first chicane, and then Singapore, Japan, Kota, Mexico, and the season finale at Interlagos. Qualifying for these races will be done under the current knockout qualifying session rules, and this is the best mashup of entertainment and competition. There's always cars on track, as opposed to the 12-lap 1-hour system where nobody would do anything for a while, the back markers would lay down some rubber, and then the top teams would go out and bang in one lap right at the end, because they could. As for the points, I've chosen the first place down to 8th place system, which I quite like. It penalises retirements a bit more because of the small gap between first and second place. It means that a dominant few opening rounds could be undone quite quickly. Only needs an engine or a gearbox to go pop, and suddenly somebody else is right in the mix for taking the lead of the championship or jumping multiple places in the standings. And it would be cool to rig all of this in an AI season for Grand Prix 4, a spec 2007-2008 era car painted in the liveries that have been identified on the graphics that you've seen previously, and then put together so that they can go and have a championship and we'll see who wins, just as a bit of fun. Now, if somebody could put that together, because I can't paint or put the mod together, that would be greatly appreciated. It would save me some time and I can actually get on with doing that. And then I'd have to try and make it a fair representation of driver skill, because it's all, you know, it's all subjective, isn't it? Plus, I'd probably get chewed out that Max didn't win, or Lewis didn't win, or Michael didn't win, or Michael's car blew up, or this, that, or the other happened. And yeah, you're not really going to please everybody, are you? But anyway, I've tried at least to put together the ultimate Formula 1 season. I've tried to keep a spread of old versus new and all this other stuff, and also put in some teams that were, you know, fan favourites back in the day. If you think I've done a good job of this, or a semi-good job, then do give the video a thumb up, and if you want to see more stuff like this, then get subscribed and also get that bell on so you never miss out on anything I do around here. Massive thanks as ever to the kind folk at Patreon, and if you want to help support me at a more personal level to buy up images and stuff for the historical stuff, then a link to Patreon will be in the description box along with links to my socials. And there's also super thanks as well if you want to just buy me a beer or a coffee or whatever. So until next time, I've been Aidan Millward. Have a cracking day wherever you live in the world, and I am going to need a cold beer after putting all this together. So until next time, goodbye.